Okay, welcome, folks. Here we are. Welcome to Feel the Force. We have a special guest today, John McIntosh, to talk about self-realization. And the theme today is mass awakening. What is really going on? So I'm just going to introduce John a second here. So for decades, John was a successful entrepreneur, eventually becoming a multi-millionaire and traveling to many parts of the world, speaking to 10,000s of people about personal development, self-discovery. He had been a student of spirituality since 1976, touching into most well-known belief systems, but found that with that wisdom and having reached the top of what the world calls success, he still felt a bit empty and unfulfilled. As a result, in January of 1999, he left it all behind, totally committing himself to self-discovery no matter what. From then on, he focused entirely on this fiery quest, leaving no stone unturned. John shares his acquired understanding of the false self-identity together with his personal experience of thinking with the heart, which returns you to full conscious awareness of who you really are. So that's the preamble, and John is going to join us momentarily. So thank you very much. Okay, so here we have Mr. John McIntosh. And John, just to begin with, I wanted to ask a very simple question for the masses, which is why self-realization?
Why in terms of the word, or in terms of why pursue it?
Why now more than ever? Because there's so much chaos in the world and distracting everyone seemingly from...
It seems like that, yeah, but that's not really what's happening. Self-realization is just simply the awareness of truth, the awareness of what is. The mind, that is the separated self, what I call the false self, some call it the ego. I don't use that term because there's so many connotations. The false self is a very simple way of saying this is not who you are. So the false self likes to speak about evolution, about growth, about becoming, about pathways, about getting better, self-development. All of these kinds of terms are very familiar, and it's in a huge industry. I was in it for 30 years, and it made me very wealthy. But it's also a dream. It's not real, because the false self is not real and it can't be improved, and the real self is perfect, and so it can't be improved. So the whole industry is basically just a dream. But you don't get that until you get it. The self, which is another word for God or consciousness or I am, you could also call it truth. You could call it love, not the love that most people think of. Unconditioned love is virtually unknown on the planet at this point. Because the false self is made out of or manifests as a result of conditioning. So how can you have unconditional love if you're made out of conditioning? But once again, you don't know that until you know it. You could also call it joy. Joy is different than happiness, which is a sibling of sorrow. On a roller coaster back and forth, joy is a flat line. You can be in joy, you can be as joy rather than in joy, or have joy. As joy is different than being, is different than having. While you're in excruciating pain, you can still be in this subtle, very subtle thing called joy. You could call it peace, you could call it freedom, you could call it beauty, you could call it abundance. All of these things mean the same thing. And even those descriptions are not sufficient. So the self then is, in parenthesis, it doesn't change, it doesn't grow, it doesn't get bigger. What what we, as the false self, when I say we, I'm talking about humanity, um, do is get this feeling that we are becoming more of the self. This is not true. We're becoming aware of who we are already. The self doesn't go anywhere. And the simple metaphor, which has been used thousands of times, is the sun. Let's call the sun the self, and the world, basically consciousness of the world. And I don't mean consciousness in the sense of the self. I mean consciousness in the sense of a level of awareness or lack of it. Consciousness basically is looking at the sun through clouds. In some cases, depending on the individual, because you have basically one planet, but you have almost 8 billion different worlds. The sun is seen partially, or seen very much as the sun in a handful of people around the world, or it's seen not at all and is covered completely by clouds. The clouds may be referred to as one's conditioning. Conditioning or programming, if you like, is attachments, what we're attached to, all expectations, what we're hoping for, end results, etc. And whatever we identify with. I am John Doe, and I'm a pharmacist, and I'm a male, and I live in Brighton, and I have a dog, so I'm a dog owner. I have a wife, I have children, and the list goes on. It's quite a lengthy list. I'm a gardener, amateur, but I'm a gardener, and I like to bowl, and I like to swim, and so I'm a swimmer, I'm a bowler. And all of these things. And then I have these certificates on the wall to say other things that I've accomplished. So this is who I am. Absolutely not true. Those are identities. And these are tied, these three things are tied to memory, which is the past, which doesn't exist, and imagination, which is very, very celebrated throughout the world, is a very, very good thing, also an illusion, which is the future. That is the fabric of the garment that is wrapped around the self to hide it, to mask it, to disguise it. And in this way, the self is hidden from itself. When I say self, by the way, I say it in capital letters so as not to confuse it with the false self.
Of course.
And so when conditioning dissolves, it's like clouds dispersing, and the sun, the self that you already are, just simply becomes revealed to your awareness. Not to you, because there is no you. There's only the self. You see, people say, I have a higher self. I have a soul. Then they'll add, and then there's God. And then, oh, by the way, there's angels. And then there's guides. There's ETs. Then I'm channeling these different entities. All of these things are made up. They're convenient vehicles to give the self a different name. But really, it's the false self they're giving a name to, because there is only the self. There's nothing else. So if the self is, let's say, one, then the concept of separation must be an illusion. How can the self be, let's say, you plus God, plus everything else? That's separation. And people will say, yes, oh yes, absolutely, I believe in oneness. Oneness is definitely true. And then they'll say, God told me. And right away you have separation, you see? So the awareness of truth is limited in the vast majority of humanity as it stands now. So self-realization is one way of speaking about the revelation of the self to itself. And what I call the self in its, let's say, bondage under the garments of conditioning as a person, as an individual identity, is the slumbering God-self. It is never not the self, but it can be hidden from itself. Now, how did this happen? Well, the self actually, you could go back further and call it the absolute. The absolute then uses consciousness as a vehicle, like a screen in a movie theater, to project the illusion of separation. It has the idea of separation, and on it, it projects the illusion of separation called the universe, or universes, if you like, and let's say our world, and then let's say our body, to bring it to the microcosm, and then steps into the illusion so it can know itself. It can know its potential, because the self, or one, is empty. It's nothing. And in order for it to know its, let's call it potential, it has to have a frame of reference. It has to have a from here to there phenomena in order to be able to observe itself. So it has to create this illusion to see itself. Otherwise, it's empty, which is a pristine, exquisitely beautiful state of awareness, of consciousness, but it's not all that's possible. So the self steps into it, and then in order to, if I could use a comparison, I don't know if you like Harry Potter. I happen to like Harry Potter.
I love Harry Potter.
The books were, I think, one of the best sellers. Maybe the Bible's only the bigger seller. People would very often read the book before they went to the movie. And then they'd go to the movie, and of course they'd make all these comparisons. Well, it didn't say that, and it said this, they've added this, they've taken away that. It's not quite the same if you go to the movie and you haven't read the book, because then when you're in the movie, everything's new. So you could say that the self has stepped into the movie, into the body, into the world, into the illusion of the universe, world, body, and forgotten itself so that it could experience itself as if for the first time. If it read the book, if it knew what was coming, it wouldn't be as much fun. And God's first expression is laughter. So, but okay, what if it's not laughing? What if it has chronic arthritis? What if its family is killed in a car crash? What if it has a big business and it goes bankrupt? What if it goes through a painful divorce and the loss of the contact with children? Name it. There's thousands and thousands of scenarios like that. Yeah. That also is an experience, because this self that you are, when I say you, I mean you, and I also mean all are, and this includes everything. Trees, insects, birds, mountains, everything is the body of God in the illusion. Everything has a level of awareness, and self-awareness is possible in the human. So if it's in this scenario, it's going to experience itself at the level of that awareness. For a rock, that awareness, you could say, is very small and very limited, but it also is a way of accumulating vast amounts of, you could call it memory. Remembers everything. You can pick up a stone. People call this psychometry, and they can, if they're sensitive to that, they can feel where the stone has been, what it's experienced, many, many things it's gone through. So everything is God in disguise as a body, temporary, so not real, and yet real because it's emanating from this projection on the screen of consciousness, experiencing itself unconscious of who it is. That's why it speaks about a God, whatever name you want to use, outside itself. Gradually, what happens when it reaches the stage where it's ready for this so-called self-realization, it starts to become aware that maybe I'm somehow connected to this. And so it starts to talk about God is in me, the spark of God. Yes. God is overshadowing me. And you hear all this kind of language, and religion will call it the Holy Spirit. And there's many, many ways of describing this intermingling or intertwining of God and man, yes. God and anything. it's not correct, but it's what the level of awareness can accept at that moment until it gets to the point where it can say, I am God. Now, that's blasphemous to most of humanity.
Yes.
But it's blasphemous to say you're not God. For example, using Jesus as a reference, he said, you'll do what I did, only you do greater things. Well, if he was ballyhooed as God, which he was and is, then why would he say that you can do what I could do and you can do greater things? See?
Yeah.
He also said, quoting from the Psalms in the Old Testament, know you not that you are gods? And the truth is, no, you don't. And then in the more recent Course in Miracles, which is supposedly a channeling from Jesus, he said, I don't have anything you don't have. I just don't have anything else. And anything else means I don't have any conditioning. So he's just saying, I'm the same as you. I'm your brother. I'm not your master. I'm not better than you. Sure, I'm God, but so are you. You just forgot. That's all. Very simple. Now, this is extremely serious, but it's not really serious. You see what I mean? That's why he said, in order to come to heaven, you must come as a little child. Well, he was using the language of the time. There's no such thing as heaven or hell. But in order to remember who you are, you must have humility. You must have simplicity. You must be vulnerable. That's what he was really saying. But he spoke to the ears that could hear those words at the time. The language is different now. The language of most sacred texts, and there are many, and they all say exactly the same thing in a different way. The language is esoteric. It's difficult to understand. It requires, these classes where you study the Bible, or you study the Quran, or you study the Dhammapada, or you study the Torah, or whatever it is, for years, for lifetimes.
Yes.
None of that's necessary. But it is necessary until you recognize, because of your study, that you don't have to do it. Like suffering is necessary until you realize that suffering is unnecessary. But it brought you to the threshold of the understanding, you see? So it doesn't matter what a person is involved in spiritually, whatever discipline or modality or practice they're using, none of them will bring you to self-realization except for self-inquiry. Which is, who am I? But all of them, if it resonates with someone in the moment, can bring them to the awareness of self-inquiry. And they all dovetail to self-inquiry, which is the direct, lightning fast route home that anybody can take in this lifetime because of where we are right now in the cycle, moving into the age of peace and light.
Yes. Yes.
We're actually in it now. We stepped into the so-called age of Aquarius on December 21st last year.
Indeed.
We interfaced with it directly as a solar system in December 21st, 2012. And we have been basically approaching it for about 100 years because you can say that the Aquarius is an air sign, and we have been exposed to all kinds of air-related phenomena for the last 100 and some odd years, like air travel, radio, television, internet, you name it. There's airplanes. There's all kinds of things related to air, and so this has been gradually influencing the solar system and the world, this world, for over 100, maybe 150 years. All of this is a dream, however. Yeah. It's all happening. It's all real in the dream, just like karma, which is basically another word for conditioning, but I don't use it either because karma has so many connotations. And reincarnation, which is, coming back into lifetime after lifetime. These are true, but only within a dream. They're dreams within dreams. They're not real. They don't really happen. But in the dream, they're real. So we can say that anything that's happening, anything that you can, as the Think and Grow Rich book said, anything the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve.
Yes.
And this is true. Absolutely true. None of it's real. None of it's actually happening. But it's real, but not real. It's a divine dichotomy.
Sure. And how would you explain the phenomenon of, suffering, disease, death, especially when certain people would prefer to, well, live longer and more happily.
Okay, so let's take the word people out of it and just say false self. The false self, which then we give a label to and call it a person, and then we give it a name. The false self doesn't know what it wants. It seeks but never finds, because if it finds, then it has to die. As soon as it finds itself, it has to die. So it never truly is seeking. And of course, if you're seeking, it suggests that what you have or what you are is not here now. And so therefore that puts it out in the future. Well, the future is about time and space. Time and space are the children of separation, the belief in separation, which doesn't exist. So the concept of seeking keeps the truth from the false self, which is exactly what it wants. It doesn't want to find, because if it finds, then it realizes that it's not real. It has to die. It's called dying before you die. It's not the death of the body, it's the death of identity. And there's nothing more fearful. Losing the body is not a big deal if you believe there's an afterlife, which is also made up. That's another dream. It's there for sure, but it's a dream. The afterlife is a dream. There is only the self. So you just move from one dream to another. You just don't have a heavy body, more gross or dense body. So the death of the body is not a fear to a lot of people, because they believe there's something afterwards, or they sure hope so. But if you don't have that belief, then the loss of the body is an enormous fear, because then you lose your identity. You cease to exist. That's the great fear. Yes. But of course, it's not looked at. And why is it not looked at? Because the false self can't look at the idea that it has to lose its identity to discover who it really is. And it's not the false self that discovers it. It's the slumbering God self that's wrapped with conditioning that remembers who it is, because the false identity dissolves with the conditioning. The conditioning makes the false identity. So to get to your question, let's just talk about pain and suffering, to put a label to it. Pain is absolutely inevitable as long as we're in a physical body. Suffering, however, is an option. And suffering is as a result of the belief in being a victim. And the belief in being a victim is as a result of the belief in separation. I'm separate. There are levels. There's a hierarchy of haves and have-nots. And that doesn't just include, let's say, possessions. It also includes health. So there's a hierarchy of wholeness and of illness. And so the belief in separation creates this idea of a hierarchy, which then places you, if you believe this, as a victim if you're experiencing the lower part of the hierarchy. Or you can, let's say, be rich but also sick. So you can experience both at the same time. And then, a multitude of others. And so when you are a victim, what you do is you say, I don't want this. You may not mentally say it, but a lot do. Oh, God, I can't stand this anymore. I've got to get rid of this. And so you're resisting. And it's resistance that causes suffering. When you say yes, which is surrender, when you say yes to what is, you're recognizing that this is happening. It's happening right now. Now, it might not happen 5 minutes from now, but right now, it's happening. So you're not resisting it. And immediately when you stop resisting and you acknowledge this is happening, an enormous weight falls from the shoulders. Now, some people go through this. Everybody's experienced it very often because they're so weary they just can't resist anymore. But the full awareness of the fact that you're resisting is called surrender. So when you surrender, you cease suffering. You could still have excruciating pain in a multitude of different ways, physically, emotionally, mentally, but you're not suffering. It can't molest you anymore. And this makes life vastly different. Yes. Few recognize this.
Yes. Yes.
Now, getting to a greater point, and that is, if the self is quote unquote, lost, you could call it imprisoned or in bondage, in the dream of the world as a person, then how does it escape that? Mm. Well, it would be lost forever if it didn't turn toward the light. And the light is not out there. There are no answers in the physical world. The biggest library in the world does not hold the answer. I don't hold the answer, but I can point to who you, meaning anyone, are not, who you are not. I can't tell you what truth is because you can't put a frame around infinity. I can experience it, you can experience it, but I can't tell you what it is. Anyone that says that they can tell you what the truth is has no concept of what the truth is. But you can point to what it is not. And it is not anything that has a beginning and an ending. A body, for example, has a beginning and ending. A soap bubble has a beginning and ending. A universe has a beginning and an ending. Everything in between. Anything that's in the physical realm has a beginning and ending, is therefore not real. So you can't find the truth by looking out there, no matter how pristine, no matter how beautiful the teaching might be. If someone's telling you what's not true, that's someone possibly worth listening to. More importantly, and this is what happens as you get closer and closer, you listen to fewer and fewer, you read less and less. Eventually you listen to no one, and you read nothing. Mm-hmm. And you only listen within. Now, when you turn within, then truly and humbly and respectfully, with reverence, because as the Bible says, God is not mocked. You can't fool God. It'll know if you're sincere instantly. And it, of course, is you, telling you that you're still too arrogant for the truth. And so it'll give you some more suffering, some more pain, because it's pain and suffering that brings you to your knees where you can't trip. And so on your knees, metaphorically, in the state of humility, of vulnerability, you're open. And when you're open, now you can receive, because you're not placing anything in front of what's coming in. And when I say what's coming in, it's within, coming in to the attention that you're placing on truth. So when you place your attention on truth, call it anything, call it joy, as I said, you can call it God, you can call it whatever you want. But let's say, in my case, I called it freedom. When you place your attention on freedom and you are genuinely sincere about wanting, you can call it wanting, to be free. You don't really know that freedom is who you are, not something you have, because what you have can be taken away from you, but who you are, then freedom rushes to you. This is the metaphor of the son. What did they call it? The son that left the father and then came back. What's that terminology? The prodigal son, where he leaves and goes out into the world and spends his gift. Well, that's just the false self going out into the world and experiencing the dream. And when it comes back, when the son comes back with humility, the father rushes out to see the son, and he basically is running faster towards the son than the son is running towards him. So when you place your attention on freedom or God or whatever, self-realization, then you are returning to and this is where this idea of the Father, which is just another name for you, is being approached. Truth is being approached, and the Father, the truth, you are rushing towards you in that framework. That's what happens. So the truth comes to you very, very quickly. And the way that it comes to you, you would think, is now through many spiritual people live in this illusion. Life becomes, sitting around the fire, drumming and singing Kumbaya with all your friends. No, that's not the way it is. That's the nice, fuzzy, cozy, comfortable way that spirituality makes one's life more comfortable in the 3D world. But that's not the real thing. The real thing becomes extremely difficult. It's what I call standing in the fire of who you are not. And what happens is the mirror of your world then becomes more clear in a variety of ways. There's a myriad number of possibilities. And that clarity then triggers you rather than maybe once a day or once every 2 or 3 days through this or that bothers you. You know, somebody cuts you off in traffic and you get all upset, or someone lies to you and you're pissed off at them. Now it comes like a machine gun. You know, trigger after trigger after trigger. It's in your face everywhere. This is your conditioning showing up, the conditioning that is now ready to be dissolved, showing up to show you who you are not. And when you don't distract, sedate, or run, which is typically what the false self does, one of those three things or all three, I was a runner, then you're standing in the fire of who you are not. Yes. And when that happens, conditioning then has the opportunity to be in your face, and now you can dissolve it. And the best way to dissolve it is through self-inquiry / surrender. That's the lightning fast route. But once the mind hears about it, realizes or believes that's far too simple. It believes in no pain, no gain. I have to really suffer. I have to really, well, of course, you do suffer when you're faced with triggers, but the solution is what I call see-spot run, simple. It's below kindergarten. It's so simple. The return home to the awareness of the self is incredibly simple, and I'll just explain how it works. Let's say that you are cut off in traffic, and you know, you roll down the window, and they swear at you, you swear at them, whatever, road rage, and that's a trigger. And that triggering is basically showing you that your rights are being taken away. Now, forget about or go beneath the story to the energy of the story. And what is it? Well, it's a feeling of unworthiness. It's feeling I'm not being respected. I'm not being looked at as worthy. And that is the actual conditioning that is manifesting the condition of the situation that you just went through, and thousands of others like it in different forms, because the self will use whatever it can to get your attention. And usually it takes thousands of attempts to finally get your attention. So now when you've made this choice to be free and you're standing in the fire of who you're not and you're being triggered, now you're paying attention, because you make what's called the no matter what choice to be free. And no matter what means you're not holding anything back, nothing. You're willing to actually die. You're willing to lose everything, which is what happened with me. I was extremely wealthy. I had everything. I had the life of the rich and famous, and all kinds of possessions. I could do whatever I want, and was. And I also had 25, 26 years of spiritual study behind me. So I had both, and I was still miserable. And I reached the breaking point. And when I reached the breaking point, January 5th, 1999, I said, I can't take this anymore, and there must be a better way. In some way, I said that. And that's when the doors opened. And I had basically said, in some way, I didn't use those words in those days, but this is what I meant: I'll do anything to be free. It's what I call the no matter what choice to be free. And that's when the self knows that you're sincere. And then you get this blizzard of conditioning in your face through triggers. So now when that happens, self-inquiry can be used instantly. You don't have to wait till you're, quietly by yourself. You do it right on the spot. Ideally, you definitely, if there's a red light in front of you, pay attention to that first and then do it. But whatever it happens to be, you can do it immediately. You just simply say, who is it that's angry? You could say about this situation, or you could just say, who is it that's angry? And then the answer is always, never embellished, always me. Never is there a different answer. And then the question is, who am I? That's it. Nothing more. Now, you're not looking for an answer to the question, who am I? What you're doing is you're handing the reins of control, which is what the false self is constantly trying to do, control the world. You're handing the reins of control over to grace. Grace is love in action, which is another name for you. And grace then dissolves that layer of conditioning. Now, anger might have 1,000 layers, but that layer is now gone because you handed it over. It doesn't matter what the situation is. It could be, you're jealous of some guy that's looking at your wife or your girlfriend, and you say, "Who is it that's jealous? Me. Who am I?" That takes 3 seconds.
Yes.
And it is more powerful than any course, any practice, any discipline that's ever been taught anywhere in the so-called time-space continuum of history, which is also an illusion, but anywhere. It's the simplest way. It's the direct route home. Now, if you add to that surrender, which is saying yes to what is, then it's like the other side of the coin. It's basically self-inquiry and surrender are 2 separate things, but they're one and the same. Surrender is what I chose because I was down on my knees and I said, I'll do anything. I didn't know about self-inquiry then. And about 13 years after I jumped off the cliff and I left millions of dollars behind and all my power that I thought was power, all of my influence, all of my nice, cozy life, I left it all behind and dove in. You don't have to do that in most cases. I had to do that because that happened to be my destiny. And it was because I was very arrogant. And why was I arrogant? Because I needed the arrogance in order to get me to the stage of being successful. Because what happened when I was a child was my, and of course the parents that came in were the perfect teachers to help me bring the conditioning with me into full bloom so that it could be brought to full view to be dissolved. So I needed the perfect parents, and what they were basically combatants. It was like living in a war zone, and I was unseen. I was unloved. I felt unloved. I may have been, but I felt unloved, unseen, unworthy, no good, invisible. And so my reason for becoming wealthy, for becoming an entrepreneur and then becoming wealthy, wasn't about money or possessions. It was about being seen. But in order to do that, the shield that protected me from the slings and arrows of getting there, because I can assure you most people don't get there, was arrogance, a false sense of importance, which I had to lose then. Once I realized that I was miserable, I had to lose that. And so therefore I had to lose everything that I had in order to bring me completely, not just to my knees, but on my belly. Where I could cross the bridge into my freedom, which I did in 2013. Wow. But just to cap that off, what happens when you do that is it's like you step off the stage of the dream and you're in the audience, but you still have conditioning. So I call it freedom with baggage. And now you're at the stage where you can start looking at the baggage, recognizing that the one on the stage is not who I really am. And as you do that, if let's say you're using self-inquiry and the conditioning is dissolving, you kind of move up into the amphitheater, the audience, where you have freedom with echoes, not so much baggage anymore. And then when you're almost completely free, you move into the balcony where you have freedom with whispers. It's like walking through a park of fresh air and flowers and trees and so on, and then all of a sudden you smell cigar smoke, and as you continue walking, it's gone. So for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, you smelt this whisper, this waft of cigar smoke in the smoke in the midst of this sublime environment. That's what it's like to have freedom with whispers, and that's just a hair's breadth away from total self-realization, where the self is completely gone. That's where I am, and have been for about 5 years.
Wow. Yes, profound. As you mentioned, words are only useful to an extent and don't really, you cannot put a frame around infinity. And They say that silence is really the true language of God. I mean, to speak.
It's who you are.
Mm, mm.
It's another word for you.
Mm.
Silence is not necessarily the absence of sound.
Mm.
You can be in a noisy downtown cacophony of energy and still be silence or silent or still. Same thing, means the same thing. Because it's when you hear this concept of being in the now, you're not talking about some sort of a time reference of this moment. You're talking about stillness. Now is where the presence of time, there is no such thing as time in the now. It's not like, oh, right now I'm in the now. Oh, now I'm not. Now I am. No, that's a reference to and an attention on time and space. Well, if you have an attention on time and space, then you're basically fighting with an illusion. And that makes it bigger. Whatever you place your attention on gets bigger. Like if you buy a green car, for the next 3 weeks, all you see are green cars. And it's because your attention is on that. Whatever your attention on is on expands. That's why if your attention is on freedom or truth, it expands in your awareness. It's very simple. But most people's attention is out there. And it's usually on many things. And so that's what they get. And it's like saying, you know, if you expect the worst, that's what you'll get. Absolutely true. That's where your focus is. So it's not a question of stilling the mind, because now you're focused on stilling the mind. And if you're focused on stilling the mind, then the mind must not be still. You see? So you're fighting with a mind, the monkey mind, whatever you want to call it. You're fighting with a mind that's shattering away. It's a never-ending battle. You might be a little bit successful, maybe in a couple of hours of meditation. As soon as you come out of it, you're back into the fray. No, you simply place your attention on one thing only. And then all the other chatter disappears, because whatever you stop giving your attention to fades away and eventually dies. You know, one would have to struggle, most would have to struggle to remember their first girlfriend. But when they broke up, let's say they broke up and it was difficult, that's all they could think about. You see? But 20 years later, 30 years later, maybe a song or a smell or a name will remind you, but it probably won't in most cases. You see? Your focus is what makes your reality, and your focus is always what you believe you to be, who you believe you are. And that's what manifests your world. So your world is an identical, precise mirror of who you believe you are. Now, you and I can walk down a high street, let's say in London, and we can agree there's shops over there, give them a name, shops over there, give them a name, cars just pass by, there's street lights, and we can agree on all those things. But then we could be asked what we feel about those things, and our feelings could be diametrically opposed, totally opposed. We could have all kinds of psychological ideas about them, because who we believe we are is unique to us. So our world is totally unique. And when you step off the stage, now your attention is not focused on the actor on the stage that you have been. It's focused on the baggage that you are dissolving so that you can remember who you really are. Yes. It's just about attention. Attention on an intention. The intention is truth. The attention is your focus. Combined with passion is what manifests everything in life. Whatever you manifest in life, things. And in most cases, most people's attention is wobbly. It doesn't stay in one place. If you focus your attention on anything, doesn't matter what it is, you have no education at all, but you'd like to be a jet pilot. Somehow, your world will manifest the ways and means for you to become a jet pilot, because your focus is on it. Somehow. Yeah. You'll get a mentor, you'll get a gift, a grant, somebody will see you, or you'll be pulled into a special program. Something will happen to bring you to that as long as you keep your attention on it.
Yes.
Everything in the dream is possible. That's how I got rich.
Hmm.
I knew this when I was 20. I didn't know about truth, but I knew how to manifest.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what I would like to do, though, if I may, is to just touch on the mass awakening that's occurring right now.
Absolutely, yes.
And I'd like to point out that awakening has three levels. I give it three levels. And the world right now, most of the world, is not even at the first level. But they are very rapidly approaching that level because we're shifting from the dysfunctional masculine patriarchy influence, which has ended, not giving it a bad rap. We're not saying it's bad. We're just simply saying that that's the influence that's been here. And that's what happens when an influence is at its end, at the end of a cycle. There's basically, this is one way of explaining it, a 26,000 year cycle where our solar system revolves around a central sun. And then that central sun revolves around the galaxy. We're also coming to the end of that cycle, or we've just come to the end of that cycle, which is something like 250 million years. This cycle is 26,000 years, and it repeats over and over. For about 12,000 years, it's masculine, 12,000 years, it's feminine, and it has two breaks in between, which is called a neutral phase or an age of peace and light. And we have just entered that. Some people call it the photon belt, which is about a 2,000 year period. And so when that happens, there's like a house of cards, and the house of cards collapses. Well, if you look at the world for the last several years in particular, certainly for the last 100 years, but the last several years in particular, the world has become more and more chaotic, more conflicted. And certainly in this last year, and particularly since November 6th with the American election, there has been enormous chaos. And it doesn't matter what side of the fence of one's belief system they may be on. Certainly if they listen to the mainstream media, they're listening to a pack of lies. But that's okay too, not a judgment. That's just the way it is right now.
Yes.
Then what's happening is there is a great deal of concern, anxiety, fear, conflict, chaos, confusion. Well, this is what happens at the end of an era. And at the end of the era, there is a unique opportunity. And that opportunity is whenever you're shaken, whenever you're upset, this is a form of suffering, only it's accentuated suffering, accentuated conflict. And it's in those moments, those pockets, where the opportunity to shift awareness, shift consciousness into a higher level of awareness becomes acute for the masses. And that's what's happening right now. So people are about to, and when I say about to, I'm talking about literally in the next 24 hours. We just happen to be in that window right now where the so-called inauguration of a president is supposed to take place tomorrow, which is most definitely not going to happen, not for real. And the conflict surrounding this will then open up into, there's no nice way to put it, a bag of worms that has been the way the world really is. Yes. For about 250 years, but most poignantly for the last 100 and some odd years. This is not saying that the self has a point of view that this is good and that's bad. It's just a story, just explaining the dream. But in that awareness that the world, humanity, is going to experience, not just America, but everyone around the world is going to experience, starting, well, it's happening right now as we speak, but certainly in the next 24 hours, it'll be very poignant. Things will emerge that will shock many people. It'll drive some people insane. Yeah. Now, that's different than being driven out of your mind. That's what you really want, is to be driven out of your mind because the mind is a false self. They want the mind to take its rightful place as the operating system of the body, as a servant to the self or a servant to the heart. But right now it's the other way around. So this shock or shocking circumstances that is about to occur globally, where so many people thought the world was XYZ and they find out it's ABC, totally different than they thought it was, that they have been a slave, they have been a servant, they have been not abused anywhere near close to what they thought, but way, way beyond that. And that the people, the perpetrators, the people that have been involved in this have been running governments around the world. You notice the Netherlands government just fell. The president of Italy just resigned. We don't see the Queen. Other governments and leaders are falling away. The Pope has been arrested. These kinds of things, if people are aware of these things, this is actually happening and has happened. Why? Because they've all been part of what you could call the deep state.
Yes.
For the last 250 years, particularly the last 100 years. And they have been exposed. They've been exposed before, but they just murdered the people that exposed them. But that didn't happen this time. Now, this is not conspiracy theories, because the self doesn't talk about the world as real. It's just telling a story about a dream. It's not taking sides and saying these are the bad guys and these are the good guys. That's the language that you'll hear through the media when it gets cleaned up. But it's not what the self, I am, is talking about. I'm talking about an energy shift and an opportunity where the shaking from one belief system to another is so acute, so extreme, that it provides for the possibility of this surrender into the turn within to towards truth. So this is a unique moment when the world awakens to the deception that it's gone through. Now, let's just take the word deception. The possibility exists. Let's say the dust is cleared, things are still happening, but the dust is cleared. And for example, the world economic structure has changed and it's more gentle and benign and caring towards the entire planet, which is what's going to happen. The entire medical system has changed and healing is far, far easier, which is going to happen and is happening. Cleaning up the world because of a completely different energy system that's been suppressed since the days of Tesla, and it will now be revealed, is about to happen. And so therefore cleaning up, the damage from fossil fuels and things of that sort, and many other things, is about to happen. So let's say this is on its way. Most people are aware of it. It's a year from now. And the dust is settled. And awareness is kind of sitting there. And people are now in the first level of awakening. But they're saying, well, if I was so easily fooled my entire life, maybe you're 100 years old, my entire life was so easily fooled, what else might I be fooled about? This is a major chink in the armor of the slumber or of the prison that consciousness or awareness or the self has been imprisoned by. So if that question is there, now it will expand because there's a focus on maybe there are other things. What happens somewhere along the line, and it'll happen quickly because there'll still be much chaos going on in terms of a shift, not upsetting chaos, but chaos in terms of change. The opportunity exists for the awareness that the world is a dream to dawn upon billions of people. Now, this will first of all be a mind-oriented belief, and the mind is not sufficient to take a person to the no matter what choice to be free. And there are many people that have this belief now, but they pay lip service to it. Then, oh yeah, sure, the world's a dream, and then they just pass it off. But this is a major statement. When that mental belief becomes a knowing, and if you compare belief, trust, faith to knowing, you can see that in belief, trust, and faith, there's still some doubt, but knowing is knowing. You could be my little brother, and I've been riding a bicycle for 2 years, and you're about to get a bicycle, and you've seen me ride the bicycle, and you believe if my brother can do it, I can probably ride a bicycle. And so you believe it, but you haven't done it yet. As soon as you get on a bicycle and you ride the bicycle, now you know you can do it. It's vast difference, tiny difference, but vast. So when you know that the world's a dream, everything changes. Because now you see nothing here is real. And that's when the no matter what choice to be free is just a hair's breadth away. It might be immediate. It might take a few years, but it will happen very quickly. What I'm seeing here, even though it's a brave new world and it's wonderful and all these wonderful things are happening, I want to go deeper. I want to know what truth is. And so that takes you from the second, now you're between the second and the third awakening. And the third awakening is self-realization. So there's three different levels of awakening, and most of humanity right now is in the first. So I wrote a little handbook called Mass Awakening, What's Really Happening. It's like a 45-minute read. It was #1 in Amazon for a few weeks. It explains in more detail what I've just explained is happening as we speak. But just to put a point to the pencil, as we speak right now, I'll just be a little bit 3D here for a moment. Many people have been watching the news. And if you're watching the news, you're not getting the truth. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. The news is owned by 6 corporations, which is basically 6 people. And they're all major players in the cabal or the elite or the Illuminati or the deep state, as it's called. Remembering this is just a dream. I'm not saying anything is good or bad. I'm just explaining what's really true. True in the sense of a dream, what's really happening. And so the mass media is controlled by this. And anyone that looks at what's happened on Twitter and Facebook in the last weeks and months, you can see that freedom of speech has basically disappeared. They can do whatever they want to stifle the voice of anyone that they want.
Yeah. I was banned from Twitter.
What's that?
I was banned from Twitter. No explanation. So
hang on, I just lost my plug here. They haven't heard both sides of the story. Both sides of the story are also a dream, but it is what's happening. So they don't know, for example, they may not know that the election was a complete fraud. The president got something like 75, 80 million votes, and it was stolen through various ways and means. A lot of people don't know this. They've heard rumors of it, but they think it's nonsense. They think that's the fake news. It doesn't make any sense that Trump had tens of thousands of people at his rallies, and Joe Biden had, like 30 or 40 or 50 at a rally. That he didn't rally at all, but he supposedly got 80 million votes or 70 million votes. It makes no sense, but that's what the media is spinning the story. The media is the way of programming people by saying the same thing over and over again. For example, they say that the Titanic hit an iceberg and it sunk. No, it didn't. The deep state sunk it, exploded it, to kill 3 top financial people in order to create the Federal Reserve Bank a few years later so that they could control the world economy. That's what really happened, and that'll come out. They say that Oswald killed Kennedy, one person. With all the nonsense stories wrapped around that, there's about 7 shooters, and some guy from the ditch actually delivered the kill shot. It was George Bush Sr., who was the head of the CIA, that orchestrated the death of him because he was a major player in the deep state. They say that 9/11 was Osama bin Laden, who happened to be on their side. No, it was the deep state, because there were trillions of dollars missing in the government, and they had to hide that. And the records were also in the Pentagon in that location. And so they exploded the Twin Towers. The pictures of planes flying into the Twin Towers was a hologram.
Yes.
And they were explosions. And then, of course, the towers came down by programmed explosions. Tower 7 didn't have any planes hit it, but it came down in a planned explosion. And the Pentagon was hit by a missile. There were no bodies, no baggage, no nothing anywhere near the Pentagon. And the fourth plane, which supposedly went into a field, no bodies, no luggage, no nothing. It was so easy to see that it was fraud. Thousands of engineers have now come forth and said that it was fraud. But the media was controlled and is controlled by the deep state, not for many more days, but it spun the story. And the CIA made up the terminology after Kennedy of conspiracy theories in order to make people say, oh, well, they're just crazy people walking around with tin foil in their head. They said the same thing about UFOs. Well, UFOs, I mean, anybody knows that, you know, there probably are other beings in the universe and in the galaxy and in the solar system. In fact, we're surrounded now by many different races around the planet who are here for this big shift that's happening. And many of them are part of this new force, the space force that Trump created just a few days ago. Actually, it's been in force for many, many years, but they just announced it a few days ago. And this is not for the purpose that they're talking about, going to Mars. You know, we have space stations on Mars and on the moon right now, and on many other places in the solar system. It's because there are many other beings that are working with Trump and with others in the government, and have been for a long time. In fact, Trump would be dead now probably without them. There's another assassination attempt, a very serious one, January 9th, just a week ago Saturday. There've been many attempts on him, but he's been protected by unseen forces. And this is why they were able to put power out in Pakistan a week or two ago, and in Iran just a few days ago, and I believe in New York just a day before yesterday or whenever it was. These are all part of the takedown of the deep state, which is going on as we speak, everywhere. And there will be tens of thousands of arrests. Many of them have already been arrested behind the scenes. And this is happening as we speak, including Biden, who's part of a crime family. And then when the news comes out about pedophilia, which is probably what convinced Trump to run for president, the military approached him to run for president. It'll be revealed that the millions of children that are abducted every year are being used for practices that are unbelievable. And there's documented evidence of this that's massive, that's now starting to come out. They've already saved, I think, in the last year or so, over 1 million children that have been hidden in tunnels under the earth. There are thousands of tunnels all over. England has many, many tunnels. And there are children that have been down there. Some have never seen the light of day. So this information is going to come out, and it will shock people to the core. But this is an enormous blessing. And remember, all that I'm explaining here, this is stuff that's easy to find if you search beneath deep state, the deep state-owned mainstream media. It's just a story. It's just part of the shifting energy of a dream into a new dream, where the opportunity to become aware of who you really are is expanded exponentially. And that's happening as we speak. Yeah.
Wow.
Major shift right now.
Absolutely. I can feel it. One more, another thing I wanted to add about the deep state. Do they, obviously, they're not self-realized, otherwise they wouldn't be doing what they're doing.
They're deeply asleep.
Yeah. But are they still part and parcel of the one self? Because there's a lot of talk about...
of course.
Okay.
There's nothing that isn't.
Right. Okay.
Well, if we take away the word deep state, it's just a made-up word, a group of people that got together, and decided they would create a one world order, which is a term we've heard a lot about lately, and their financial reset is the current terminology. You've heard your own prime minister talk about this. Our prime minister in Canada talking about it, and many others. George Bush Senior talked about the one world order that we can create. Bill Gates, who is one of the major perpetrators of the deep state, and his campaign with vaccines and chipping people so they can identify them and all this kind of stuff. This is all very real, and has been going on. COVID was orchestrated by the deep state, and it's nothing more than a seasonal flu. Exactly. The survival ratio is 99.6%, and the so-called success ratio of the vaccines, at best, and maybe for 2 years, maybe without side effects, is 95%. Why would you go backwards? It's a flu. Take what is it? Moxichloroquine.
Hydroxy.
And hydroxychloroquine and zinc and erythromycin. It has a 100% success ratio. Thousands and thousands of doctors have now proven that with tens of thousands of patients. And they stood up to the rules of the government and and of the American Medical Association or the Medical Association in other countries, risk their licenses and help patients anyway, and proven that works. And there are many other things that work because it's just the flu. Masks are extremely dangerous. If you look at the Spanish flu, that killed 50 million people. Most of the people died from bacterial pneumonia, which are caused by wearing masks. Masks compromise the immune system. But they also keep people away from one another, social distancing. All of this is about separating people so that you can divide them, crush the economy so that the only alternative is the deep state's reset, which is basically give me all your possessions, I'll give you an income for life, you never have to worry again. But it makes you a slave. And then from there, they move into euthanasia, which is to kill 90% of the world's population. That's part of the plan as well. So if Trump was not reelected, didn't get back in power, by the end of 2021, the entire world would be enslaved. It's that serious. But it's not possible because we're moving into the age of light. And it doesn't matter what the ways and means are, even if Trump didn't get in, then the energy associated with this shift would create circumstances through the earth, such as tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes. It would create circumstances that prevented it from happening because it can't happen. Not when you shift into a new energy. The manifestation has to be coherent with the shift in the energy. And we're moving into an age of light and peace. So that's inevitable. No matter how it happens, it's inevitable. It's the best, certainly the best of times and the worst of times combined, like they say in Tale of Two Cities. But it's a wonderful moment to be on the planet and in a body because it's an opportunity to be free in this lifetime. Anybody.
And as you said, it is a story, and I kind of feel like I'm in the middle of Lord of the Rings or something, with the whole.
It's a very good analogy because Tolkien understood all this, and that's what he was writing about.
Absolutely. So we've come up to an hour. Is there any more you would like to elaborate upon, John?
No, that covers it. We've basically saved the universe.
Yes, absolutely. One video.
Yeah, that's it. It's all done and dusted.
Done. So much love and gratitude, really, for being here.
That's a joy.
As the fellow self. We're just.
Yeah, I'm just talking to me.
Looking in the mirror.
That's all. Yeah. That was Michael Jackson's song, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
The Man in the Mirror?
Man in the Mirror, yeah. Beautiful. Well, I shall accordingly post the links below in the description box. And for you out there watching this, thank you so much.
Yeah, people want to get my book. They can
Yes.
get it by simply going to my website, johnmcintosh.info, which you'll see beneath the video.
Perfect. Excellent, John. So, John, we can continue for just a few minutes afterwards. But I'm going to complete this recording, if that's all right. So thank you, John. And
My pleasure.
And take care till next time, folks. Thank you ever so much. Thank you.